All right, you're 2 for 1. Doing pretty well here. Number 4.
Hold on, re-say that. I'm not 2 for 1. That's impossible.
Oh,
2 for 3.
Legitimately
You're 2
couldn't-
for 1. Are you selling my body? 2 uses for 1 payment?
Welcome to Going In Tight.
Coming out loose.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Going In Tight, Coming Out Loose. This is Bart Lewis back after a hiatus. With me as always is Chris Gibson. How you doing, Chris?
Hello. I'm glad to have you back. That's what I can say.
Oh, it's good to be back. So tonight we got a packed full episode, so buckle up. We have Howard Hitchock, the CEO of Lionel, the company that does all the Diecast collectibles for NASCAR, as well as unpacking Richmond this past weekend and who's on the bubble to be cut this upcoming weekend in Bristol. And I'm back to talk more about fantasy advice. Chris can no longer draw people out of a hat randomly. And also talk a little bit about silly season as it continues to get sillier. So let's
Good
just
Lord,
get
it's
this.
getting silly too.
It's always silly. So let's get this going. So Chris, what do you got to rave about, Richmond?
I'm going to do something that's not popular, and I'm going to rave about Austin Dillon. I think that he is showing up, and you saw a lot of people on social media. Is Austin Dillon as good as he's showing, or is this a fluke? I don't think the amount of times that he's shown up in the top 5 and the top 10 is really a fluke. So I want to rave about the strong performance that he has had, and he has solidified himself in the playoffs. You remember I had him falling out of the playoffs. I think that he is not only going to make it into the next round, but he's looking like he's setting up the car, or they're setting up the car, and he's driving it well enough to where they could crack off a win and possibly secure themselves into a later round. So I have to rave about just how well he's driving. The racing overall was good for me, but big rave for Austin Dillon. What about you? Do you like anything?
Yeah, I'm going to second the rave, actually.
Ooh.
So Austin Dillon, he's been in the sport for a little while. 2014 is when he came on board RCR full time, and been really done a whole lot. Really, he shows up at Super Speedway. He's won some really big races like the Coke 600, Daytona 500. Just won this year at Texas, which submitted him into the playoffs itself. And so I was the one to say that I thought he would be cut after the round of 16, as I believe you were as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not looking like that, because the boy has shown up, and he led more laps this race at Richmond than his entire career at a short track. It is warranted that this was not expected, but I'm there for him. I was the first to talk badly about him, but I'll be the first to talk good about him as well.
Yeah.
I like to see shocking things in NASCAR, and I really like to see that. More so I want to rant on this one, because for me, as a NASCAR fan, I liked the race. I wasn't overly disappointed with it. I didn't hate it. I will say I probably won't remember this if you say, do you remember Richmond 2020 fall?
Right.
Probably not. But there was a lot of people giving it a lot of flack, especially on social media, that it was barn burner because there was no cautions. And I don't necessarily understand that. I think a big part of NASCAR and why people enjoy it is the general strategy of it. Yeah, cautions and wrecks are something that you shouldn't enjoy, but you do, and nobody can say otherwise.
Like watching the train wreck happen.
And you like to see a lot of bumping and banging, and I think we saw that. We saw a lot of good racing, a lot of people making good moves, a lot of clean passes. I think for most people, the fact that there was no cautions and the ending of it was really uneventful is what made people say it was so bad. But overall, I don't think it was bad. Also, really, the broadcast of it, that's kind of that's what I was looking at and saying, okay, I kind of see why. And I think it had nothing against NBC Sports. I think they're doing a great job. But I think there is the hard part is delivering a broadcast from a booth at Charlotte Motor Speedway watching a bunch of monitors, because you're not able to see a lot of things that are happening. They're only catching up on what a camera is pointing at. So I think they missed a lot of things that maybe they could have talked about storyline-wise. And then also they kept doing this thing where they're like, all right, drivers, talk about the line that this driver is running. Take us around a lap. They did that like several times, and they didn't know what to say. There was no color really that they provided that I thought was interesting. So I think it's just the COVID times where there's no qualifying, there's no practice. Things are going to be different. The tires were apparently different. And I think the broadcast really was the main point of contention when it comes to why it was something that wasn't too exciting. And then still ranting. Hold on there, Chris.
I'm holding.
Blaney, what are you doing, man?
Good Lord.
Blaney he has had a heck of a year. He hasn't won, but he has had a heck of a year performance-wise. He's done really well. And to see him just blow up in the first 2 races of the playoffs really upsets me. So come on, Blaney, get it together. He's really good at Bristol, so I hope that he can pull that off. What do you got to rant about, Chris?
Yeah, that's disappointing because we do support Blaney and we like Blaney. So it's frustrating to see him in the time where like that you see people, the trolls always come after him as he can't take that step to the next level. And this is kind of like proving their point, which pisses me off because I hate giving trolls a voice. But yeah, it's something that definitely I hate that. And then my big rant is the no qualifying. I am so tired, and this is across all NASCAR series other than ARCA. For some reason, I guess it's because it's all young kids and they can't get COVID and they're apparently immune to everything that happens. We can give them practice and we can give them qualifying, but once you get into a truck, nope, that it's COVID all the way. So, I'm a big proponent of keeping things safe for everybody as much as possible. We've had two drivers get COVID this year, but I just cannot see an explanation for why we're not qualifying. I think the system that they've come up with is a little bit better. This Einsteinian equation of how they're going to put drivers in first all the way through the 20th position. But I'm excited for next year for qualifying to be back. I think it's something that lends to the competition. You've got somebody, like you've said before, you can either set the car up to qualify well, or you can set the car up to run the race well, or you can try and do a mixture of both, and it really plays into that strategy. But now it's just a crapshoot of what happens. And then you get a case like at Richmond where Jimmy Johnson starting way in the back with the Quinn House, and somebody rams into him and ruins his car, and he's running 4 laps down the rest of the race. That's not what you want to see. That just kind of annoys me. And it's ricocheted down. It's been a domino effect of me just being pissed off about the competition level when it comes to qualifying. And I'm not as concerned about practice, but I want qualifying.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, everybody. We are here with Howard Hitchock, the CEO of Lionel Racing. Howard, thanks for joining us this evening. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Glad to be on the show.
Awesome. Well, we wanted to start out a little bit and give everybody a picture of who you are. And we know that you've been a part of this collecting business for 15 years or more now. And so we wanted to see, and it's kind of a question that we ask all the race car drivers, was this the dream? Were you collecting these things when you were a kid, or did you kind of fall into the industry and develop a passion for it?
So I grew up in New Jersey, and now Truex is from Southern Jersey, so there's somebody in the sport from Jersey, but racing wasn't the biggest thing in New Jersey. It was a little more Southern, a little more Midwest. But I had a cousin who was really into racing, and so we would watch these races, and you had the old cable selector, you had to move the notches and click the buttons, and somewhere buried down in like row 3, way over to the right, you'd find a race. And I was a fan of Dale Earnhardt, Dale Sr., and just loved his aggressive style and just how he approached races, and got to be a fan. I'm a collector by nature. I can't say that I was a collector back when I was a youth of Diecast, but I collected other things, as kids do, coins, stamps at the time. No, I can't say I didn't envision myself being this guy, but at the same time, I'm in a path that I targeted to be in, which is product. So coming out of school,
Okay.
I got an internship out of my college with Johnson & Johnson Consumer Products, and also in New Jersey, they're big up there, and got to working in a role. It was really a laboratory role, but we were working on the development of new products to support the marketing effort. And so I started to see how the process works for developing things that people consume. And so all of my jobs out of college since then have been related to product development. I've done everything from fine dinnerware that many of your wives would probably know about, registering for the bridal pattern type thing. That was my first job out of college. Very cool for a young 20-something-year-old. To Waterford Crystal, where I built a lot of cool stuff. I participated in creating the ball that fell in Times Square in the year 2000. In 2006, I came up to North Carolina from Florida. I was living in Florida at the time, and came up here to be part of the Diecast team. There, I was responsible for the Diecast under different companies' names, but the same product. Now I'm the CEO of all of Lionel, so I have the trains as well as the cars. So the cars are part of my responsibility. But my passion is working with the product teams, the marketing teams, and bringing things to life that are just awesome, and people love them, and you really get a rewarding sense for that.
Yeah, and that was kind of our next question is, could you give us a little insight into not only how the business became so collectible? When we talked a couple of weeks ago, you told us about some awesome collections, but how Lionel got into the sport. I know it's been a little bit more recent, but it's been around so long.
Sure.
What was Lionel's path into Diecast?
Yeah, so Lionel is celebrating its 120th year this year. Of making trains and collectibles. And we certainly would be considered a collectible product, as well as sort of a mainstay product, something that you would find even at your mass level stores for celebrating the holidays as part of a decoration. But Lionel came into the picture in around 2010. Actually, that was the official timing, a little bit before that in the background. And so I was with Motorsports Authentics at the time, which was the merged company from Action Performance and Team Caliber. And at that point, we had Motorsports Authentics had the responsibility for all of the trackside merchandise, pretty much all the apparel. There was a couple of small companies doing some T-shirts, most of the hard goods stuff, all of the Diecast. And so we oversaw that. And so there was sort of a big shift in the licensing world for NASCAR. And for those that don't know, most of the time when you go to these big leagues, you sort of get the league as part of your contract. So you go to the NFL, you get the teams, the team signature, or the logos, the name. There's usually a players association. So if you want to do specific stuff, you actually need the players association as well as the NFL. But you're kind of dealing with two contracts. In the Diecast world in particular, it's a little more complicated because at the time there was NASCAR as a license, the entity. If you wanted to put a track on it, you had to get the track's rights. Driver, team, and sponsor typically would come as a package deal, but you still had to go get that as another right. You had the OEM, which is your car manufacturer, so the Chevy, Ford, Toyota, Dodge at the time. And then if you had a third party, like a movie or a special property, that would have to be layered on top of it. So from a licensing construct perspective, it's extremely complicated. It's actually the most complicated sort of setup I've seen. And it's fractional, like when you're paying royalties, depending on where you sell and what you sell, it's sort of fractional. So the whole notion was, let's bring all this together. Let's reset the field. The teams came together. They formed what they called the licensing trust. And at the time, there was a shift in the business. Motorsports Authentics was essentially becoming just the trackside operator. And so all the other pieces of the business were moving to other partners. And so NASCAR was seeking someone who had some experience in Diecast. The leadership at the time of Lionel had some background with NASCAR. And at the end of the day, where our products are manufactured, we actually also make trains. So it was really a very nice synergy in terms of we already had a representation in the factory. Honestly, Diecast has taught the train side a little bit about how to decorate things a little more complicated. Conversely, the Diecast side has gotten some benefits on some technology effects, with things for the car side of the business. And then from a business perspective, they actually pace out very nicely because, as you could imagine, trains with Christmas are very heavy Q3, Q4 oriented. So a lot of activity going on in the warehouse and a lot of activity around the sort of holiday season where the collector side of the Diecast actually sort of peaks with Daytona. So there's a mad rush. Really, we start developing paint schemes now, ideally, for what would be the launch or the kickoff of the season, which is Daytona. So it was a little easier when there used to be less paint schemes per driver. Now we've got a lot of drivers who have many paint schemes. Right. So we always try to offer the majority of these paint schemes out there, and really move the build to order model into place so that we really wanted to protect the industry and we wanted to protect the collector. We didn't really want a glut of product in the market being discounted. We wanted that residual value there for the collector. So that was the whole impetus for that.
So I think you just blew everybody's mind. I don't think anybody's ever going to look at a car again, a Diecast car, and say, "Oh, that's pretty simple, little car there."
Yeah, it's much more complex than it seems. I have a licensing guy who works for me who is a grand wizard at how to take our sales, dump them into an Excel. We're getting to the point where we need access and sort of like manipulating it and spitting it out in the right way, and remarkably accurate, which is awesome.
So I would say Lionel really took Diecast and made it something good, great. So took it from good to great. But there was some OGs of this back in the day. So a guy named Fred Wagenhall, I believe his name is, yep. And even big guys like Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon. Can you tell us a little bit about how those guys had to play in the collectibles business?
So Fred was an entrepreneur and really started action performance. And he saw sort of with the advent of the Days of Thunder timing. There was another company called Racing Champions that was sort of in this space a little bit. But he really saw the big picture of how you bring these cars to life in a bigger way and make them something bigger, and really drove the whole impetus behind special paint schemes, and his teams would build these big programs. If you remember, like when the Looney Tunes came to track and there were several cars decked out in Looney Tunes, or Chevy Rock and Roll, or there are lots of different programs, movie programs, because at the time, most cars were sort of single sponsor, and they really were kind of always looking for something a little bit unique and different to try to draw some attention, drive some merchandise sales, put a special story on the track, that caught the attention of the fans, and broadcast. And there was a bit of a competition because there was this other company called Team Caliber that was out there that was doing it for a handful of teams, particularly the Roush-oriented teams or any of the Roush partner teams. And they were making Diecast, and they had the Team Caliber brand, so it was sort of an arms race. If they put on an extra vent or special engraved piece that was more realistic on the front, Action had to respond by doing something different. And so the collector won in this because they really kept driving each other to be more realistic, more cool, the ultra collectible car. So he had a big part in it. Now you sort of mentioned Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt, and these guys, more Dale because he was a little more senior than Jeff. Jeff kind of came into the picture in a little bit in the background or later in the story. But Dale really saw the value of bringing the merchandise and the brand and what he represented and the number 3 to the track. And so he had his own merchandise company. One of the guys that actually runs the RCCA club worked for him. I always tell the guy he must have had child labor issues because he doesn't seem that old. He's younger than I am. But he's been doing this for so long. He was literally in the warehouse, when Dale was really involved in the merchandise strategy. really sort of grew the trackside business into what it was through others. And then it moved around to multiple companies, multiple representations, but Dale was sort of the impetus for it. The land and building that we're in actually started as a Dale Earnhardt, Jeff Gordon sort of partnership. So they really realized they were businessmen, right? And they were athletes, but they were businessmen, and they understood the value of their name, their brand, what they represented, how you get that directly to the consumer, and really built that fandom that is what they really cherished, which was the following. So it's a very, very long storied history. It's cool. It's colorful. There are a lot of stories, both written and unwritten. It's sort of the urban legend type stuff. There have actually been some books written on it.
Yeah, so they kind of had that persona of going at each other on the track, and they definitely had their fair share of run-ins, but then when it came to the money-making side of the business, they were like, we can put our heads together to make this one work.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of stories about those two guys, and my understanding, and there's actually a really awesome cover shot. It was for, I believe, one of the RCCA magazines. It could have been the ARC magazine, the Action Racing Collectibles magazine. But, Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon are on the floor playing with cars on like sort of a big carpet mat type thing. So to have that, and I mean, when you look at it, there's some old catalogs and stuff that go back, and when Kelly and Dale Jr. were part of the business, and they were part of the business, they worked under the Action brand. They're actually some of the models. So when you go back and you look, and they're wearing the outfits and the jackets and stuff like that. So it's been a family business for the Earnhardts. And honestly, when Dale was driving, I mean, he was, we worked with his licensing representative, but he always had an eye toward, well, what does this mean in terms of how we bring it to the fan, or what's collectible about it, or why is it special? Or I remember him being on QVC talking about like how he wanted the white rockers on the side of the car because, it made it look better and it would look good on diecast and it would help sell it. And so, and they were more expensive, but they had to have them because he was part of that design element, so it was very cool to hear.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's cool about NASCAR, and we talk about it all the time, is it's one of those things that kind of puts the people closer to the fan. There's other sports where if you buy a jersey, the player may not have a hand in it, but to hear something like all these guys who are like, we want to have part in what we're giving to the fan, that just takes NASCAR to a different level, and not only the relatability, but the connection you have to your favorite drivers.
Yeah, I mean, when you really look at it, the sport itself is truly one of the most accessible at the premium level, right? So when you think like, okay, so minor league baseball, yeah, you can get up really close to the players and stuff like that. And Major League Baseball, some stadiums are pretty fan friendly when you batting practice and that some of the players come over. But the masses, the amount of people typically that can be on pit road and can be around the action and see these guys, it really is just different. It's different. They consume it. Racing is a very sort of sensory sport, right? You smell it, you feel it, you hear it. If you're in the wrong spot, you might taste it. Like, right? Like it is like, you're getting hit with, fumes and smoke, and if you're in the pits, there's tire pieces like flying around, and you hear the impact wrenches and guns, and it's just there's just so much going on, right? This sort of organized chaos that happens, and this routine that you just kind of watch, and there's so many people that have access to that, and it builds a fan for life. You can take the most uninterested person in racing, related to racing, to a race, and take them on pit road, and you will turn them into a fan because the experience is just so like enveloping, I've had bankers from New York come down and different things, part of our ownership structure, and they'd never been to a race. And by the time they got done, they want to like chat about, who won this weekend and what's going on. And they were watching.
That's
so it's
awesome.
It's like I said, it's just one of these things that, it kind of creates fans just because it's so immersive.
So we talk a little bit about how a fan of a specific driver definitely wants to collect those specific unique schemes. Me, myself, I can appreciate most drivers. And if there's a cool scheme that comes out like Jimmy Johnson just had, I'm definitely all over that. What are some specific things within Diecast that collectors are really seeking?
So there's several answers to that. So you're right. We really view it as there's sort of two types of collectors. One is a fan-based collector. Typically, they are driver-focused. They may, to a lesser degree, be team-oriented. So, like, if they're fans of Chase Elliott, right, and they may also be interested in the other Hendrick guys. Once in a blue moon, you'll have, like, Team Chevy, they'll collect Chevy drivers. And then there's what we call the completionist. And so the completionist tends to be more oriented toward our NASCAR Authentics line. And we kind of promote that by the fact that on the back of our 64 scale, there is a checklist of all the different cars that you can get in the wave. And when they go into these stores, and we have videos of it, we've run some contests. I mean, they wipe out the peg. They want all of it. And because of the way that cars are distributed through mass, sometimes a wave of cars will only wind up in certain regions and won't wind up in other regions. And so they make friends with some of these other guys, and then there's like buying co-ops, right? And so like, I'll pick up a few extra of these cars for you, you watch for that for me, and they kind of trade it. So it's great. So they're kind of the completionist. Outside of that, on the core driver side, when you talk about our ARC or our elite products, autographs are a big thing. There are some that really want that autograph. Now, a lot of the guys don't want to buy the autograph from us. They want to get the autograph. So they want to take the car there physically themselves. And I don't know if you guys have been to the race and ever noticed, but there's some that have like constructed these coolers with like slots where the cars go in. And honestly, we've interviewed a number of drivers, and they have said, like, when they look and they're walking down a line, they know who's spent money, because the Diecast car is the jersey of our sport, right? There really isn't something that's comparable. We used to, back in the action days, and maybe a little bit still to this, but definitely to a lesser degree, there used to be something like a uniform jacket that made the guys look like they were wearing the fire suit. The fans look like they were wearing the fire suit. But we consider the Diecast to be the jersey. And so the drivers have said openly that as they're walking down, if somebody's got, the free cards that they hand out at the rigs, or t-shirts or a ball cap, they reach for the Diecast, because they know that that's an invested fan. That's somebody who's spent, in the ARC level, you're probably talking $60 to $70. If you're in the elite level, it could be, 100 or more. But autographs, because not everybody can get to the track and has access. So that's a big one. They also look for, in the back window of every car, we put on there what we call the DIN, the Diecast identification number. It's much like your vehicle's VIN. It's a combination of the product code, the sequencing of the numbers. Each digit kind of means something. And then the last 4 digits are the car number. So 0001 is car number 1. And so car number 1's highly desirable. People will pay a lot of money for those. Door number cars are also highly desirable. So the 09 in the case of Chase Elliott would be a car that people would want to pick up and would pay a premium for. There's special finishes that are usually much lower runs. Some people like the special finishes. Some people are purists and they don't like the special finishes. They think it should be the way it is, and that's the way it should be. Prototypes are probably, outside of maybe the number 1 and the door number, are probably the most sought after and will command the most premium. Prototypes are something that we do when we make the cars. So the cars go from, we get the artwork from the team, we put it on our template, we send that template out for approval. It's an art file, an electronic file essentially. That goes to the teams, sometimes a sponsor for approval. Once that comes back, we upload that art to our factory. The factory turns that car goes through a printing process, turns that car into a sample. We typically make 6 of those cars. There are exceptions. Sometimes we'll make a few more. Sometimes we'll make a few less. The really, really valuable cars, quite frankly, are the ones that either radically change from the prototype to the finished good, or are cars that we prototype that we never actually make. And it does happen. It's not very common. And we really do try to control that. But what happens is when we get those prototypes go out for approval. And again, depending on which team, which sponsor, there's a certain number of those cars that have to leave our facility. Typically it's 2. So there's typically 4 that retain with us and 2 that go out. Those 2 oftentimes, well, sometimes the drivers want them. Sometimes the drivers' foundations will get a hold of them, and you'll get them through auction sites. Sometimes the licensing group just kind of keeps them all in a big cage, and then they'll do a massive purge. And typically there's these hardcore collectors who know people at certain places, and they'll wind up with them, and so they'll kind of funnel through the same channels. But prototypes tend to command a pretty heavy price tag. And then finally, there's just cars that people love. So like Jimmy Johnson, who obviously is retiring, 7-time champion, probably a feat that will never be repeated. You know, the tribute throwback car to Richard Petty, to Dale, and of course to himself, was a really awesome paint scheme. And it's going to just sell well because it's a really awesome story. There are tribute cars, things like Kobe Bryant this past year. Those sold well because sometimes there are things that extend beyond just the realm of NASCAR or just the realm of a driver.
Right.
Black Lives Matter with Bubba Wallace was a big car this year. The Blue Lives Matter was a big car. There's just different themes that tend to react. Military cars tend to do very, very well within this space. But you never know. Sometimes there's just fluky ones. Maybe it's a one-time car that a driver runs and they maybe win in it, which makes that car pop a little more than it might otherwise. First win cars oftentimes are pretty popular, pretty big, especially if they're a special paint scheme. Those will also be highly sought after. So there's no real particular formula. There's certain things that typically happen. Once in a while, a car will surprise us. It always happens that the most sought after, or highly sought after cars, like we have literally 12 minutes to figure out how to get it to market before. We like it when we get it, months in advance, and occasionally that happens, and sometimes we'll even have product there for a special event when it works, when it goes that way. But these days, it tends to be that we're getting it very last minute. Just it's the nature of the beast right now in sponsorship and the sport.
Yeah. So you mentioned that there are some of these that it's like a single print, and we saw one that was going for like $7,000. That was like a Dale Senior with Brooks and Dunn under the hood for some reason. So what are some of like the biggest collections? You mentioned when we talked a couple weeks ago, a Jeff Gordon collection that's out there that's massive. What are some of the biggest ones you've seen, and what do people do with these when they move on from the collecting side of things?
Yeah, there was at one point in the past, and probably when QVC was ultra popular with the For Race Fans Only show, it was kind of in the 80s when other things were doing this as well, right? There were trading cards, there was Beanie Babies, there was Diecast collectibles. All of these were on a bubble that people really, I think, felt that they would have long-term value, and they would treating them like a stock was probably not the right approach, but that they sort of thought like, I'm going to get these things. I'm never going to take them out of the box. I'm going to put them in the top of the closet, and my kid's going to, in 15 years, going to need to go to college. I'm going to take that down and I'm going to go cash that in. And unfortunately that didn't happen for those folks. And really, we always tell people, because a lot of times people will say, hey, what's the value, right? Like what's the value? The value is what it brings to you. So it's the enjoyment that you get out of it. Perhaps the memory that you have, you got that, maybe you took your kid to the race and you bought a special car, and that's more meaningful than any financial sort of aspect to it. But there are some people that have amassed collections that are just phenomenal. The person I was speaking about with the Jeff Gordon, her name is Charlotte. Charlotte is an RCCA member. She's a good friend of the business. We know her well. She had a room in her home dedicated to Jeff Gordon collectible stuff. And these folks, when they're into it this hardcore, they don't just buy diecast. They buy everything Jeff Gordon. So, I mean, if there is like a comforter done, if there was a real car that was done, which there was, they have that. They have sheet metal. They have engine parts. They have shoes, shirts, things he's worn, signs, sunglasses. I mean, you name it, they have it. she was actually featured. So when the Hall of Fame opened up here in Charlotte, she was actually featured as part of the Hall of Fame story on collectors and collecting. And actually one of the guys who worked on the Hall of Fame, Buzz McKim, I actually did a radio show with him called the NASCAR Collector on Sirius XM. For a couple of years, we did that, and we would take call-ins and have guys call and talk about their collections, how they got stuff. One of the coolest pieces from that I remember was Dale Jr. used to work up at his dad's auto dealership. He had a Chevrolet dealership, and Dale Jr. used to change oil. And so they did a program that, your Goodwrench technician was, and it was signed Dale Earnhardt or Dale Jr.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't Dale Jr., it was Dale Earnhardt Jr. And that he had that piece from when he had gone to get his oil change, right? And so that was a collectible. We talked about that on the air. Really cool, right? Not a diecast, but still something very, very cool. So yeah, there are guys that are huge fans of just about every driver. We host an RCCA event typically in May. We didn't do it this year, obviously for reasons around COVID. But we have a couple hundred folks come in. We serve lunch. We typically have a driver or two. We have had the likes of Bill Elliott and Chase Elliott. Dale Jr. came a couple of years for us. We've had some Hall of Famers. And they get up and they talk. And we have had some auctions. And we sort of throw a few things in. We'll say like, all right, these die-casts signed here on stage, 2 hot passes, and something else, right? And these packages will go, and it's all to raise money for a good cause for the foundations that the drivers have. But we've had them go up in the $8,000 range. It's part of it is they're very generous people who have the ability to do that. But it is they're getting a special thing that it's sort of a once in a lifetime type thing. So collectors, value is something that you have to kind of put a value on it in your head, right?
For sure.
What I collect or what you collect, you got to sort of say, what is it worth to you? What enjoyment do you get out of it? And that's the real value.
So when I was growing up, social media was not a thing, and I didn't have anybody to connect with around my own collecting. But nowadays, that's a big part of it, is being able to connect on social media with different fans and talk about their collections and discuss different things. What is it that Lionel is doing on social media to connect with fans, especially younger fans?
We tend to try to do a lot on both the train and the car side as it relates to social media. And, each platform sort of has its own sort of demographic, the target audience. We are fortunate on the car side because we do have the club. So we have the racing club, which has its own forum and has a virtual garage aspect to it. And these collectors have kind of built a fan base, and they really kind of did a lot of that before there was social media. But we do engage with influencers. We support different efforts by NASCAR with some of the youth movement stuff to try to get cars in kids' hands. Some of the stop motion stuff that some of these kids do. I don't know if you've ever watched some of these things, but they reenact like maybe the last 3 laps of the race, and it's all stop motion, and they've got them in the right, we've got the right cars in the right order with the right paint schemes on them. Really cool stuff. They're very creative. We've held some contests where we like show us your ultimate collection. I'm trying to remember the exact name. I can't off the top of my head, but it was, show us you're the ultimate NASCAR Authentics collector. And essentially kids and parents with kids and parents or adult collectors all sort of contributed material to us. And they might've spelled out NASCAR Authentics with cars, or they did stop motion stuff to do that as well. Or they, just creatively hung them on their walls. Like there was one guy that had literally these things pegged every inch of the wall. But it was all the cars on the backer cards. But we're always sort of trying to support and engage and connect with fans in the digital space. It does change collecting. It changes a lot of things. Mm-hmm. The way you go to market, the way you sell, the way we do launch. We have a show called The Fix that we produce internally. There hasn't been any episodes recently because getting people together is only recently are we back in the office. But actually, the guy I mentioned who worked for Dale Earnhardt's company is Thomas, who is the host of The Fix. And so, you know, he's on there, and he's awesome with the fans. He knows the stuff. He is passionate about it as much as they are. And for him to lead that space really makes a world of sense for us and the brand.
Yeah, and I just recently, so when I purchased that Jimmy Johnson paint scheme, you all had a deal going on the site, and I don't know if you still do, but there are a few different ways that people can become members. And Thomas got the little form in the mail that he had signed and everything. So how can people, one, become a part of the RCCA, and what are some of the benefits that you get when you become a part of that? You already mentioned the big event that you all do for some of those higher end collector members. So
yeah, so they there are, depending on your buying habits, there actually are levels within the RCCA. So the more you buy, the more points you accumulate. But you get the catalogs, you get the communications from us. We do offer exclusive products time to time, sometimes the autograph stuff, or we may do a variant special finish that's only available through the club that you can kind of get a hold of. Typically, we try to host a couple of events at different tracks. So we'll bring people out and we'll give them, temporary hot passes, give them a little bit of a garage tour, do a meet and greet type thing. That kind of stuff has obviously all been disrupted this year. And, we don't really know what the plan is going forward on that. We, of course, have the big event. That's sort of the big piece. Honestly, the last 5 or so years we've been in Miami. We've had a suite in Miami that you have access to purchase the 3-day weekend, championship weekend, and I was there, and Thomas and others from our sport, and it was a time to kind of mingle with other collectors, other like-minded collectors. We gave away every caution, we'd give away a prototype. So that, that's how some of those cars get out there in the marketplace. There's some of those that they might not be their guy, but they know somebody who wants that or whatever. So there's a really nice, you sort of are part of a community. You can jump on, LionelRacing.com and head over to the RCCA Elite, and be part of that. And I do, like you said, I think there is a couple of different ways. There's a way to pay, but I think if you spend a certain amount, there's also a deal where you can kind of get a free membership. And I believe they are lifetime. So if you're into collecting diecast, it's definitely something you want to check out. The Elites are the premier cars. Mm-hmm. They have the most bells and whistles and the most features. They have the full diecast chassis now, and the more detailed engine compartment, and the opening deck lid. And we're looking at, as you know, the cars are in development for 22 now. It was originally going to be 21. Mm-hmm. So we're in the process of having the conversations internally and with the factories, like, okay, here's the technical data. Here's what the car is going to basically be, the common greenhouse elements. We don't have any of the OEM specific stuff yet, which is basically the front, rear, the windows. You know what it is from this year. But what we're trying to do is figure out how we're going to make the Elite car different from the other car. Well, we still make the other car cool. We just want to make the Elite car just a little cooler, right? So we're kind of trying to figure that out now. And we actually have I'm not gonna spill the beans, but we have a pretty cool concept that ties into the car, the real car, which we've been able to get up close to and kind of see and understand a little bit. And so I think it'll make the Elite car just that much cooler.
Awesome.
To have it when the new ones come out.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing the complexity of this, because I don't think most people realize that when it comes to product development, it can take from planning to reaching a doorstep or a store years sometimes for that whole process to shake out. But in Lionel's case, a new scheme comes out for Throwback Weekend, and that can be a matter of months. So not only complexity of the ins and outs and the history of it, just so cool to hear. And the best thing that I heard you say is that the value is the joy that it brings to you, because that's what I feel. And I think that's what a whole lot of fans feel. So thank you so much for sharing that and spending time with us today. It was so cool to hear that story.
Yeah, absolutely. I've enjoyed it. I love talking about it. I can go on and on, as you can tell, I'm sure. But, you know, a long history. And as I said, I'm very passionate about products, very passionate about the team that I have that does an awesome job on both the car and the train side. I mean, I've got some of the best I've ever worked with in terms of product development, the engineers, the different things we do. And, you know, they kind of hate it sometimes, but, you know, because the CEO likes to be involved in the product, it's like, hey, what about we tried, and they're like, if you tell me to make another tin, I'm going to shoot you. Most consumers who aren't in product don't understand the stuff that you go into Walmart, Target, you see today, wherever you shop, doesn't matter. That stuff started 18 months ago, right? They were in line reviews with buyers, and they were putting ideas on a table, and they were, you know, finessing things, and they're taking forecasts, and they're ramping their factory up, and they're putting it on a boat, and they're getting it here, which takes at least 30 days, and then at least to the East Coast, 30 days. And then, you know, it gets to distribute through the network of their warehouse, the warehouses of the retailers, out to the stores. You know, and a paint scheme comes out that we may not know about, and it happens. Although we have good relationships with the teams, once in a while they're highly confidential for whatever reason, or it's an opportunity that comes up because something happens that you don't expect. And so we have to start reacting from basically the time everybody sees it on social media for the first time. Our clock starts and people are like, why isn't it here? I don't understand. You know, it's on track. You should be able to build, you know, they built a real car. Yes, they built one real car. Don't take me wrong. I don't want to do what they do, right? But we're trying to make lots of little cars over there. There's a whole line, factory of people. We're trying to move around and shuffle and packaging and approvals and licensing rights. And it's why I'm gray now.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a trip. Well, Howard, we thank you for joining us today. And, you know, we look forward to hopefully getting out to your all's facility once all the COVID stuff's over, and just seeing how you guys work, and encourage everybody else to do so, because it just sounds like an awesome process, and to be able to see it up close would be something awesome.
True or false? It is time yet again for another true false. I have been away for a week. I've been meticulously compiling questions that will stump Chris, and I'm ready to unload these on him. Are you ready, Chris?
Ready as I'll ever be. Glad to have you back.
Yeah. So the theme of this week's true false is the playoffs. So the playoffs have been around, the format, since 2004 to some degree. And before it was just like whoever had the most points wins, but they changed it up, and some people like it, some people don't. They've sort of fine-tuned it over the years, but that's what the focus is. So let's get this going. You ready, Chris? Question number 1. Kevin Harvick has the most wins in the playoffs with 15 wins.
Since 2004.
Correct.
Just making sure I've got the rules down, Pat.
Yep, and it's true or it's false. That is the answers, in case you forgot that too.
I'm going to say true.
False. Jimmy Johnson has 27 wins. The guy has 7 championships.
That is fucking embarrassing. Okay. Continue. Question 2.
Since Austin Dillon started running full-time in Cup in 2014, or 6 seasons ago, 2020 is his 4th run in the playoffs.
True.
It is true. Yeah, I would say less, but he has. He showed up in 16, 17, 18, did not in 19, and he's in it this year. So, yeah, 4 times.
That makes sense. Do you know how many times he's made it out of the first round?
I'm going to say 0.
Well, he's going to change. He's going to change that.
He's going to change it. He's showing up. All right, back to Kevin Harvick. He's got another one. Kevin Harvick has finished in the top 4 drivers 10 times since his full-time start in 2001. 10 times.
For anybody else, that would sound like a lot, but man, he's been so consistent ever since he sat his butt in a Cup car. I'm going to say true.
It's true. 6, 8, 10, 11, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, and 19. He has made it in the top 4.
Don't call it a comeback, folks. Here I come.
But yeah, he's only won what? 2 championships? Or was it
2 or
1?
3?
We have to look this up.
We don't have a data guy talking into our ear, so.
He's won 2. You're 2 for 3. So moving on. Number 4. Since 2004, or the past 15 seasons, 10 championship winners did not have the most wins. Did not.
I'm going to say that's true.
Also true. Yeah, how crazy
Yeah.
is that? I think that's the biggest beef that people have with the playoff. Yeah, well, yeah. But that's crazy. Only 5 times the driver that performed the best throughout the entire season won the championship?
Yeah, but I feel like that's the same in all sports. I mean, I don't feel like you get the most unless you're talking about like the New England Patriots or something like that. I don't feel like it's always the most dominant driver was getting the W.
That's
or
fair.
The most dominant football team is getting the W at the end of the season. It's you get that one chance, and that's why I like the rounds, is because it gives somebody like an Austin Dillon who he got that one win, and it may take something to give him a little hitch in his giddy up, and he seems to have gotten it, and now he could perform well in the championship. You never know.
Counter. I agree. But counter. If Austin Dillon theoretically won the championship, would you say that he is the best driver?
No. But I also don't think that it's always going to be – I think 95% of the time you're going to get the best team. Like football last year, Kansas City Chiefs were the best team. They won it. I think most of the time you're going to get that. Like Kyle Busch won the championship. He was the best driver. I don't think there were many drivers out pacing him or his team. I don't think there were many people better than his team. So I agree with you. If he wins, I'm not going to say he's the best driver, but if he wins enough throughout the playoffs to win a championship, like if he wins himself into more rounds, the guy's earned it.
True.
Doesn't mean he didn't earn it. He may not have been the best driver. I mean, clearly it would be Denny Hamlin or Kevin Harvick. So
all good points.
I get both sides. I'm not saying the person who wins is the best driver, but the playoffs do allow for the team and the driver who plays the best throughout that period to win.
All good points. However, you're not earning more points. You're still 3 for 4 here. So moving on to number 5. Darrell Waltrip has the 4th most championships with 4, second only to Petty, Earnhardt, and Johnson.
True.
False. Jeff Gordon has 4, and Darrell Waltrip, Cale Yarborough, Tony Stewart, David Pearson, and Lee Petty are all tied with 3.
You joshed me there.
I did. Yeah. Jeff Gordon on an island by himself with 4. All right. You are 4 for 5. No, you're not. You're 3 for 5. All right. Number 6. Cale Yarborough won all 3 of his championships in a row.
I'm going to say that's true.
It is true. 76, 77, 78. The guy won all 3 in a row. Dominated in the late 70s.
Yeah.
So you're 4 for 6 now?
4 for 6.
Gosh, I'm so good at math. All right. Number 7. Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s best attempt at a championship was 3rd.
False.
It's true. Yeah, that was his best attempt. The guy never won a championship, but that
I knew that, but
doesn't mean he's not a
second.
solid driver. 26 wins, 260 top 10s, 15 poles, and 2 Xfinity championships, not to mention Daytona 500 winner. Guy has a solid track record, solid resume. All right, so you are 5 for 7. Number 8. Since the playoff format started 16 seasons ago, 9 drivers have won championships who have finished the season without the highest point standings.
Dear Christ. You're baiting me into something there. And I'm only 4 of 7, by the way.
Oh, 4 of 7.
So,
yeah.
I don't want to take any points that I'm not due.
Mathematician over here.
So I'm going to say false.
It's true.
God, man.
That was a complex one. So 3 drivers are driving at 60 miles an hour down the highway. A train meets them in Albuquerque. Who finishes first? True or false? This is how much time I had on my hands.
I know, that's a bastard of a question. You looked that one up while you were on the plane back from Utah is what you did.
That was like a solid hour on Racing Reference.
That is an evil question because that's one of those ones like I gave you with the Tony Stewart racing for Hendrick one time in the Xfinity series.
Yeah, that was
one of those ones that's so much detail.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm going to get it right because I'm going to outthink myself.
Yeah, I didn't even put the answer on that, so I think it's true. Anyway, moving on. Number 9, Carl Edwards has only won 1 championship.
True.
False. Guy has not
Golly.
won a championship. However, if the
Wait.
playoff,
That's such a bad.
just let me say it. However, if the playoff did not exist, if the playoff format did not exist today or during when he was driving, he would have won 2 championships because he did finish 2 seasons with the most points.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, that's fine.
One of them was Tony Stewart just came out of nowhere, which is another thing, like having a rough season and then like winning all of the playoffs and winning the championship. I mean,
but he deserved it. He deserved it.
Yeah, you got to show up when it matters. All right, what are you at now? Like 5 for
I only have
9?
4. I only have 4 right.
Okay.
I only have 4 right.
I really want you to have 5.
I appreciate your hope in me, but I've only got 4 right here. I'm rocking a solid 40%.
4 for 9. Number 10, final question. The debatably the greatest driver in NASCAR, Richard Petty. He won all 7 of his championships before the year 1980. True or false?
See, this is where I'm not a deep history buff, and it's going to come to bite me. I'm going to say true.
That is true. The guy started racing in NASCAR in the Grand National Division in 1958. He won his first championship in 64, his last in 79, and he stopped racing in 1992. Fun fact.
Wait, what?
Fun fact.
He went 12 years without a championship?
He went like 9 years without winning a race.
I remember we talked, he had one of those long periods, but Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, for one of the best drivers ever. That was
the same with Darrell Waltrip. They just loved the sport so much, and they just stopped being competitive, but they just kept doing it.
Yeah.
But it happens on the front end, too. Michael Waltrip didn't win a race for like
a million years, right?
Gosh, it was a long time. Like the longest streak in history, maybe. Also, fun fact, Richard Petty, he ran 15 races in the convertible division. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The NASCAR convertible division.
He won a race
with
the
PT
top down.
Cruisers.
Yeah, heck yeah.
All right. Well, I think I did okay there. I mean, 50%. You had some wordy, hard questions there. I think I did okay.
Remember, I think I got into the weeds a little bit there, but
a tad.
I'm not mad. True or false?
Well, everybody, Bart is back. You don't have to rely on me to relay his fantasy advice to you. As he said, pull my names out of a hat. He is going to give you who you need to get through the playoff race at Bristol. Now, everybody, this is the cutoff race for the round of 16. So after Bristol, 4 people will be eliminated, and we will move into the round of 12. So, Bart, who should we be taking for our fantasy teams when it comes to the Bristol race on Saturday?
So there's a lot of drivers to be had here, and that's a good thing. But it also makes it harder to really dial in who you think is going to do well based on the fact that there's no practice, there's no qualifying. But there's also a playoff cutoff going on, and there's a lot of history to look at to see who does well at Bristol. So my top picks for this race are the Busch brothers, both Kurt and Kyle Busch. I do think that they have a good chance given the fact that they are not at the top of the playoff board right now. They're going to put a lot of effort into this race to make sure that they continue on to the round of 8. I also think Clint Boyer is a good pick here. He is in the middle of the board, but has a really good track record at Bristol, so I think that he has a great chance to do really well. Chase Elliott, also think that he turns on in the playoffs, has a good history here. I think that you'll see him up top. Denny Hamlin also has a good history here, and he has just been dominating the season. And shocker, I'm going to say Blaney. I think Blaney gets his act together after 2 races of falling apart, and I think that he could possibly win this thing to keep himself alive in the playoffs. Yeah. Other good picks. Good picks, not top picks. Keselowski, I think that he could be on a roll. He has a history of winning back-to-back races, so that is somebody who could definitely shake it out here at Bristol. Logano, he's also very aware that his season has really fallen apart after the first, 4 races. So I think that he's going to be trying very hard and is generally good at a lot of tracks. Newman has a lot of good top 10s here. No top 5s, but a lot of top 10s. So I think he's a good selection. Matt DiBenedetto. He also is at the bottom of the board. So I think that you're going to see a grand effort from somebody who's really good at Bristol. So I think that you could see him ultimately get a top 1 or 2. I think Blaney is 1. He is 2. That's my prediction. Eric Almirola, also a good pick. Conservative picks. Christopher Bell, Eric Jones, William Byron, and Jimmy Johnson. I think all of those are okay picks. Conservative. We still got 8 races to go? So you don't want to use all Hardwick and Hamlin right now. So those are my picks, all 19 drivers.
Now, I have to say, there are 8 of us doing our paid playoff run here. I am in 7th out of all of those. But I also have lots of uses I have all my uses for Hamlin, all my uses for Harvick, all my uses for Truex. I've got a lot of guys on the back burner. I don't think Blaney and DiBenedetto, I don't think they're making it. Because both of them essentially have to win in order to make it. And in order for Blaney has to win in order to make it into the playoffs.
Yep.
DiBenedetto has to have Blaney win and then him come in second in order to make it into the playoffs. So you are making the prediction that they're 1-2?
Well, let's just go into this. So 2 of my 4 picks are below the cut line, Custer and Byron. I think they will remain there. I don't think that they will jump out of it. But I do think we will see a giant shakeup this week because it's Bristol, baby. Things happen at Bristol. I think given the competitive nature of this and just all the unknowns, the only known is that we have raced Bristol this year. So I think Blaney and Matty D both make the round of 12. I think that given that shakeup, and I'm not sure of the math there, but I think Almirola and Bowman actually get cut. What do you think?
Well, I think if Blaney can crack off a win, so we know that he can race a short track. A lot of these guys have short track backgrounds. So I definitely think that with the heightened, I'm going to be cut if I don't win. I definitely think he could turn in a good performance. This is one of those situations where, when you get to the last 2 weeks of the NFL or something like that, they're like, so-and-so has to lose or tie and so-and-so has to do this. He's in one of those situations where there's a lot of stuff that's got to happen for Blaney to get in there. Matt DiBenedetto is in the same position, and they both have to have a good bit happen in order to get in there. I think we're going to see Clint Boyer really, really race hard because he did the funny interview and they said, well, you're 3 points above the cut line. And he said, well, I guess I'd rather be 3 points above it than below it. So he's fighting to go into that round of 12. And Stuart Haas has given us this very bland perspective on what's going to happen with their team next year. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be a really fun race. I think we're going to have, like you said, I think there's going to be some shakeup. I really do not think that Matty D and Blaney make it through, but we'll have to see. You've outsmarted me in fantasy for years now. So I kind of trust you more than I trust me, but in this case, I'm going to trust me.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just throwing darts with the blindfold on here and I'm hoping that they stick. I think it'd be cool to see.
Yeah. So, we talked about it a little bit. We've got Clint Boyer. We've got Bubba Wallace. We've got all this shakeup in silly season. Are you ready to get silly with me?
I am ready to be silly.
Okay. Well, let's get silly. So we saw that Bubba's leaving. Do you have any idea who this spot goes to or where Bubba goes to?
I don't know. I'm so confused by this one. First of all, just make all the announcements all at once. Don't leave us hanging. But I have no idea where Bubba's going. I mean, he could go to Hendrick. He could go to Chip Ganassi. It's really uncertain where he'll go. I do think that he'll go to one of those two. We know that he has an offer at Chip Ganassi, so he could definitely take the 42. Right. I also think that the 43 goes to either Suarez or Jones. What do you think about that?
The 43. So this is a really unique conversation that's happening because RPM has shown that they can be competitive, and they've given Bubba some equipment that's gotten him top tens and consistently had him finishing better than he has in years past. So I'm interested to see if they're going to be the next victim of a JGR partnership. But I saw one weird thing out there, and it's that Haley Deegan's going to come into the car. I just don't see that happening. She hasn't set foot in a truck or in the Xfinity series, and she herself has said that she wants to make sure that she gains experience through all the series. I don't see that happening. I would love for somebody to just come out and put that to rest. But I do think Suarez is a good racer. I think he did a good job before he moved it into the role he's in now. And I also think Jones could easily be somebody who Toyota says, hey, we're going to create a partnership with RPM and we want to keep him in a Toyota car. I could easily see that.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole Haley Deegan thing, no, not at all. That's not true. Number one, she's got to dominate ARCA in the K&N series before she even bumps up to the trucks, and she's not doing that this year. So it's going to be a few years before we see her potentially in the trucks, let alone the Cup series. Come on, that's a very silly season thing to say.
Yeah, that's a reach. There's tons of like Kyle Larson news out there, and I don't see him going back to Chevy just because of when his error in judgment came about. He was with Chevy. He got fired from Chip Ganassi. It wasn't like, a mutual parting of ways. He was let go from that role. So I could see him going, you and I mentioned a couple times, possibly going to SHR. But Almirola's had a good showing. Clint Boyer has shown that he's going to be competitive. Do you see anybody filling in the 14? Do you see Clint Boyer leaving the 14 at all at this point?
Well, they did come out and say, what's his name? Zipadelli said that he does not expect changes for the 2021 season. So that kind of settles it there for me. I don't think that we're going to see anything. I think they're tailoring up their contracts. If you make the playoffs, I don't think you should be at risk of being cut. That should be
I agree.
In the job description when you look at your yearly objectives. Make the playoffs. If you don't make the playoffs, then your job is not in stone. It's up for debate. Right. And if you don't want to race, certainly it's up for debate. But I think if you make the playoffs, then I think that should be off the table. And so Clint Boyer has made the playoffs. He's had a good season. So has the rest of the drivers that Stuart Haas. So I think they're all safe, and I don't think they'll see any movement. It's weird, though, because you got two really good drivers in the Xfinity series, and you don't know where they're going to go because Penske has no spots and Stuart Haas has no spots. So does Chase Briscoe and Austin Cindric go somewhere else and take one of these spots? I know one thing, we're losing a spot because Germain Racing is shutting down because Geico took away the sponsorship. They've been with the team since 2008, full-time sponsorship with a few different drivers, mainly Casey Mears and Ty Dillon. And that's scary because that is a large company with a lot of marketing dollars to spend. So to see them exit a sport where they're getting a lot of visibility and they're a main sponsor in the sport, that's scary. But also you have to look at the fact that they're spending all this money on sponsoring a team that has really never ran better than probably like 20th maybe. I mean, they're really like a 25, 26 position team. And Ty Dillon has done about the same as Casey Mears did performance-wise. So he hasn't taken the ride and done better. So it'll be interesting to see who buys that. Are we going to see Spire buy a third?
Spire by a third. Or, I mean, there's the crazy talk out there, the silly season talk that Denny Hamlin's going to have part ownership in a team. So he might try and take that over. The reason I brought up Kyle Larson at the beginning of it is because people are covering their eyes blind and throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks with Kyle Larson, because both Martin Truex now and Tony Stewart have said he deserves to be back in the sport. But I've seen anything from him going into the 48, which is a premier ride with the sponsor that said, we're done with you, all the way down to him taking one of the spots in Spire Motorsports. Do you think somebody with the clout of Kyle Larson, and I say that in the racing term, not the personality term, but he's done well now that he's left the sport and he's been tearing up the dirt track. Do you think he would come back and race for somebody like Aspire or somebody at the likes of a Germain or one of those Starcom Racing where Quinn Half is? Do you think he'd be in that type of ride?
Well, it's hard for me to guess this one because as far as we know, besides the spots that we just referenced, there's only 2 more available. So the 37 at JTG Doherty with Ryan Priest, he's rumored to be out based on his performance this year, which isn't that bad, but everybody's giving him a hard time. So Corey LaJoie, letter writer, is going to be considered the favorite here. And then the 48, that's the one that I don't know. It could be Jones. It could be Ross Chastain. I really honestly think Ross Chastain will go to Spire. I think that we'll see that just to help build up that team before he progresses any further. I think that he is a good Cup driver, and he could get a lot more experience in a team like that before he jumps up any further. And I also like, and this is weird, but John Hunter Nemechek. I think that he, despite not really being a whole lot in the conversation, has really outdone himself his rookie year in a mediocre level car. And so that, to me, shows that he has a lot to give in this sport, and the best is yet to come for him. So I wouldn't discount each looking at him and saying that's a wise investment for us, because there's not a whole lot of good options here. Eric Jones is probably the best as far as experience goes, but I don't see that he's the well-rounded Hendrick Motorsports person. He's very quiet. He hasn't been a closer when it's time to close, and he's been with a very good team for a very long time, and he's gotten a good amount of experience in the Cup team, and I think a lot of people have expected more out of him. Counterpoint to my own point, Joey Logano had sort of the same experience with the same team, and he went to Penske and has since dominated the sport for the past 8 years. So,
and he knows how to run his mouth.
Yeah, he does add some flavor to the sport. He certainly does. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's a spot for him really. And in the same breath, he has always voiced his love and passion for dirt racing. I don't think he's in any hurry. Financial aspect is the only thing that I can think of that he is looking at and saying, I left this lifestyle that I was living, making millions, to making maybe 6 figures, running my own dirt team across the country, and I'm never sleeping in my own bed because I'm running all these races weekly. So I think, honestly, I've said this before, his passion does not lie with NASCAR. If he could make the same amount of money with dirt racing, I think that he would stay there. So I don't know that he's necessarily in a hurry to get back up there. I don't necessarily think there's a spot for him, honestly, because
he hasn't signed the contract yet, or they've got to go through this agreement for him to come back into NASCAR, and he hasn't done that yet. So I think the last thing that a team wants is somebody who was shunned by the sport in the middle of a pandemic where all eyes were on the sport because it was the only sport there, to come back in and not have the passion to do it. And so I think I agree with you. I think it could be a year before we see him maybe make an entrance back when there's a valid spot for him. I couldn't see somebody with the success that he's having, even though it's at the level that he's having it. I could not see him coming to Aspire or a Starcom or, running part-time for Colleague or something like that. I couldn't see it. Do you not think that there's space for Bubba in the 48? You didn't have him listed there. And one of the things that just sits in the back of my head is, you made the comment a couple of weeks ago, they want Jimmy to live out this one final time. They don't want to poo-poo his final season. So I don't think we're going to figure out until after that championship race what's happening with Jimmy. In the back of my head, I'm like, what could be better for Bubba than having part ownership of a team, being able to say, I need better equipment to win, than somebody going, I already have the money, I already have the equipment, just come sit in it and drive it like you have this subpar equipment.
I honestly think that it's either Eric Jones or Bubba Wallace for the 48. I really do think that. And you have a good point there. The guy has a lot of sponsorship dollars riding on him. He is taking a team that has done so-so. They've had a lot of rough years in the past, and they've really bounced back here in the last few, and he has been a part of that. And I think a lot of that is his talents that he has. So I very well think that he is that well-rounded person that Hendrick is looking for. So I would not be shocked at all if right now he hasn't released who he's going to because he doesn't know, because he's talking to 2 teams. There is a very good chance that he could be Hendrick Motorsports.
Well, everybody, that's all we have for you on this, the 15th episode of Going In Tight, Coming Out Loose. We appreciate you all for listening to us. Again, we got to interview the CEO of Lionel Racing, Howard Hitchock. We encourage you to go visit their site, start collecting some of these things. You can figure out how to become an RCCA member on their website. We also hope that you go to Apple and subscribe, rate, and review us, or follow us on Spotify. That helps us out, and we want to start reading the comments and the fun things that you all say about us there. And you can also follow us on our social media at goingintight_pod, or go to goingintightpodcast.com. We appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you next week.